Hello, I'm Paul Brown, the Director of International Education, Study Abroad, and Student Exchanges at Clark Atlanta University, and I'm here on A Conversation With to share some information about the upcoming Education and Business Mission Trip to Liberia. My guests are the Honorary Consul General of Liberia, Cynthia Blanford-Nash, and the President of Clark Atlanta University, Dr. Carlton E. Brown. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Okay, let us begin our conversation talking about the relationship between Clark Atlanta and Liberia. It has evolved over the years. Can you walk us through the different stages of the relationship and the partnership?
Certainly, I'd be happy to. Let me first say, on behalf of the government of Liberia, thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity to be here at Clark Atlanta University this morning. And on behalf of the President of the Republic of Liberia, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, and our ambassador, I bring you greetings. Having said that, as you might be aware, in 2007, President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf was the commencement speaker here at Clark Atlanta University. And so for the past couple of years, I've been working very closely with the leadership and the administration to help ensure that the commitment and the promise that was made in 2007 was realized. The good news is that we have leadership in place. Dr. Carlton Brown has made a commitment to the government of Liberia and to the tertiary institutions that he would come to the country to help provide capacity building, leadership support, and development ideas to help build this country back to the wonderful jewel that it was before the war. So the relationship goes back over many years, but we are now on a wonderful new path to help create new paradigms that will help uplift this country, the Republic of Liberia, and to establish wonderful relationships with this university.
Okay. Dr. Brown, do you have anything that you'd like to add, or?
Well, and so we've been in this conversation now for a little over 2 years, maybe a little bit longer than that, to try to really begin to hone in on the things that we must do in collaboration with Liberia to push this initiative forward. Let me point out from the outset that the relationship that we're building is a mutually supportive, mutually beneficial relationship. This relationship will be good for Clark Atlanta University, and we hope it will be good for the country of Liberia, for the Republic of Liberia. We really launched it in earnest maybe a year and a half ago with some conversation about some of the needs that Liberia has on the ground and how those line up with the capabilities that Clark Atlanta University has. So, for example, in a war-ravaged region that needs a great deal in development, the issues of water movement are critically important. Of course, we have tremendous assets in water resources and technology. Sustainability issues come to the fore in a very meaningful way as they begin to reposition the country, which they've done well. And third, and certainly not least, is the question of now that the nation has demonstrated its capacity to carry out good, high-quality government, and to be able to do governmental transitions and be responsive to the people, the economic propositions must be put in place, and that is the capacity to grow the economy, to draw new money into the country, and to position the people for that. And so last year, we brought to this location the Vice President of the country of Liberia, the Mayor of Monrovia, and several ministers and other dignitaries and some business people to provide them an audience here in Atlanta, which we did at the Woodruff Library just upstairs from here, to enable the nation to put before the business leadership of this community the business proposition for Liberia, which I must say they did an excellent job of doing. And it turns out that at that same time, there was a CNN special showing the new entrepreneurialism, the new education pushes that are going on in Liberia, and the change in the quality and the focus of life in the country. So that proposition was stated very, very clearly, and so we began to make our plans then to take the next step, which was to bring some propositions to the nation of Liberia. And so we're going with a university team of 4 people, myself, and of course you, because we want to build a permanent educational relationship and want to move our students back and forth between these countries. But also we're bringing Dr. Eric Mintz, who has about 20 years of experience around the world in water resources, water technology, water purification, to see what we might be able to contribute in this vein. And also the Dean of our School of Business, who of course himself has enormous international connections, having built a School of Business in South Africa, but as our interim Dean is very much embedded in this proposition. So we're going to have a very large education summit there. We have arranged to make some contact with the business sector in a number of places, and we intend to come away with some concrete plans for how we're going to position ourselves to help move this very, very valuable and important nation forward.
Okay. Consul General Nash, would you mind sharing with us some of the activities and the events of the Education and Business Summit, since that will be the main focus of the mission trip?
Certainly be happy to. Well, of course, the team will leave on about September the 29th. We arrive on September the 30th. Our first day of activities actually begins with a reception that will be co-hosted by His Excellency Joseph Boakai, who is the Vice President of the Republic of Liberia, and myself. We have invited 100 guests to join us, which includes ministers of government, the private sector, the presidents of the universities, both the tertiary and community college presidents, faculty and students to participate, kind of a get-to-know event in the country. The following day, which is Tuesday, October the 2nd, we will have a series of events and panel discussions. The president will drill down and meet with the other presidents to talk about university resources, what's important at the university level, how do you better manage those resources, and that will be the president's roundtable. We're very excited about that. We have 8 presidents who will participate in that discussion. We'll continue on with the various other kinds of conversations that will also include how do you encourage young people to look at community colleges as an option. For example, we had 25,000 students who actually took the college entrance exam. Many of them did not pass. So then what is the other path? Is it going to be community college? Is it going to be entrepreneurship? What is it going to look like? Short-term certification courses? All those kinds of discussions will take place on the panel. And then I think one of the most important pieces of the conversation will be the business conversation. We've invited Delta Airlines to participate. They're now flying to Liberia 3 times a week. So we're excited about that, giving people an opportunity to come to and from. But what is their business case? What kind of employees, entry-level opportunities are going to be available for Liberian citizens? In addition to that, we've invited Chevron. We've invited Metal Steel, some of the large concessionaires who are in place, who are saying that we cannot find the qualified workforce to work in these entry-level positions. So we want to build the case under the leadership of Dr. Carlton Brown and his team. How can academia help prepare the 21st century workforce for Liberia? So we're very excited. These are some of the topics that will take place over a day-and-a-half workshop in the country.
All right, are there any specific deliverables that you all look for with regards to the corporations, their participation in the summit? I know they'll be participating, but are there any expectations that we have other than just simply us preparing them for our students for employment with them?
Well, we want to help them understand the full slate of returnable involvement in the efforts that we're talking about. So that Chevron, for example, and several other companies who are right now being some very, very good partners with Liberia. We want to continue to help the country make that case, but also to help them understand how their investments on the side of education and the development of skill and capability in the country actually rebounds back to them, because the more the workers come from the country and they impact the wage structure, that in turn broadens the economy and makes their presence there and their capacity to sell in the area much more critical and important. We also have some propositions that are really advanced by one of our board members who happens to be a Liberian and happens to also be the executive vice president of Coca-Cola. And he and Coca-Cola have already invested heavily in the country in terms of the development of women's capabilities in a variety of areas. So we want to help enhance those activities. With Chevron, we also boast on our board a member of Chevron's board and a major vice president from Chevron who are connecting us at different levels with Chevron in the Republic of Liberia. We hope to again work with them to help broaden the economy, to see the critical importance of entrepreneurialism. And while the country has made the brilliant decision to develop the community college sector, because that enhances your workforce capability very quickly, what we think may be one of our unique contributions is working with them to build the MBA clientele in the country. And that in turn begins to not only enhance the development of big business, but the spread of entrepreneurialism throughout the country. So those are the things that we want to engage in during that time period and really come away with some concrete deliverables that we can come back here and put together, get USAID involved as well as the corporations, and put together a package that we think will be meaningful and impactful to the country.
Okay, as we think about returning to the United States, we want to make sure we have some deliverables. Is there any thought towards like a memorandum of understanding with the universities and with the Republic of Liberia?
Well, we're going in with one that is fashioned by the Honorary Consul General. I'll let her talk about that one. What we hope to come out of the country with is at least penultimate, if not absolutely, some concrete MOUs that we can then actualize as we go to those that we want to be our continuing partners. Again, USAID. We want to begin to impact the formation of State Department policy in relationship to Liberia, which is as yet unformed. Yet there's a broad and very beautiful Africa policy that has already been formed by the U.S. State Department. So in that context, we think we can serve in a catalytic way to cause the right things to happen there.
Honorary Consul General?
Yes, and just to add to what Dr. Brown said, we have fashioned a memorandum of agreement that we hope will memorialize our relationship in country with the presidents of the universities, including not just the tertiary schools, Cuddington, Tubman, AME University, the Baptist Seminary, and the University of Liberia, but also the 4 community colleges, Bassa, Lofa, Bomine, and Nimba. And that's going to be important, as Dr. Brown mentioned. Then we'll come back to the U.S. and drill down more specifically in terms of what those specific outcomes and deliverables will look like. But the reason why this is so important is that over the years, we have also developed the consortium of universities here. Right. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. I know you have a question a little bit later on in the program. But that particular consortium of universities for Liberia developed in 2009 in collaboration with my office and the embassy in Washington, D.C., will also help to better coordinate some of the universities that already have a footprint in the country, from Georgia Tech, Emory, Morehouse School of Medicine, and the University of Georgia, Georgia State. We have kind of fractured approaches, and I'm hoping that under this new leadership approach with Dr. Brown in a leadership role, we will be able to better coordinate and collaborate with those institutions to have better impact and outcomes. And so when he talks about USAID, yes, we have positioned the University Consortium for Liberia to USAID for funding opportunities. We have spoken to the Department of State. This trip is so critically important because they're looking at now what? We have made a promise in 2007. We brought the Vice President in as of March of this year for a business summit. We have now, less than 8 months later, through Dr. Brown's leadership, we are going in country to do the first ever business and education summit. Now, how do we make that deliverable more concrete with the kind of outcomes that will have impact in lifting up young people so they can have a difference in their livelihood in the country as well?
Right. We know that this is an uphill battle because over 12 years, the Civil War actually devastated the country. But we also know that where there's also great opportunities there. Dr. Brown, would you mind sharing with us some of the insights that maybe you will be sharing with some of the other presidents in Liberia? There are 4 that have been mentioned in particular. But could you share with us some of the insights, something that you'll be sharing with the presidents of?
Well, what we want to do is really talk about how institutions of higher education position themselves for a defined future. even in a situation where the resources are totally inadequate and totally limited, yet and still at this point in time is the issue of how do you define a path toward that future. So we're going to be talking about how institutions with limited resources have to work, something with which I'm very familiar as a president of an historically black college in this country for the second time. And so it becomes a set of questions that institutions must ask creatively in order to plot a path forward. One is, how do we diversify our sources of revenue? Two, how do we begin to define a useful and ongoing research agenda? Three, no institution can be all things to all people. So what shall we continue to do and what shall we not do as we move this program forward? And also is a whole slate of student services that are at this point very difficult for under-resourced universities to provide. And given the nature of the student population, youth who have lived a life of warfare or the movement from warfare and all the impacts of warfare. So you can imagine all of the interpersonal and personal issues that go largely unaddressed. And so we need to talk about how do we begin to get at those? How do we enable the institution to help students process the reality that they have lived, and how do we help them design a new reality? And also, how do we help them become entrepreneurial in groups and as individuals? Because the part of the issue is, how do we generate business? How do we create the exportable? And in my view, regardless of what trauma individuals have been through, if they can define a creative path forward, it begins to work against the deleterious effects of the experiences that they've had in the past. And we just want to be a part of helping them figure that out.
Okay. We can see ourselves as a point of departure, but if there are others that would like to join us and would like to help in this whole effort, what could they do, and who should they get in touch with, and how should they do so? Honorary Consul General?
Well, thank you so much for the question. In fact, this is our 17th mission trip to Liberia. My company, Global Strategies for Good, has worked very closely with Delta Airlines, as well as the RLJ companies, Bob Johnson, to help manage individuals who have an interest in coming to the country. So part of my task and responsibility as a Consul General is to promote business, is to promote education, promote cultural opportunities. So working through Global Strategies for Good in the Honorary Consul General's office, we're certainly happy to work with the broader community to help plan these mission trips, whether they be investment in trade or tourism. We understand in working with Dr. Brown and his leadership over time, the alumni groups may be interested in doing some ongoing annual trips to Liberia and Western Africa. We already have begun to map out what that might look like. We would love for Clark Atlanta University to brand that and take that to the other HBCUs, which I think would have a huge impact, particularly as we look at root tourism. What is, our history in that country? Most people do not know that there were 10 African American presidents of Liberia. How do we tell that story? Let's get inside of that country, go visit some of these historic locations, and really begin to tell the story to young people so that they can have a value and appreciation of what Africa has to offer. So if you'd like further information, I certainly can leave my contact information, and they can go to the website, www.liberianconsulategA.com. www.liberianconsulategA.com.
And we should point out that we have a number of students of Liberian descent on our campus at this moment in time, and we're finding ways to engage them in this conversation and this activity also.
Okay. There is one thing that I was thinking about, since we do have some time. At Clark Atlanta University, we just created a Global Leadership Academy. Mm-hmm. And the Global Leadership Academy, of course, is one that's designed to do a lot of what you were just talking about, entrepreneurship, preparing students to travel abroad, the mobility of students, the transmission of ideas back and forth. Dr. Brown, would you mind elaborating a little bit more upon the Global Leadership Academy, its genesis, and how you think that would be helpful in this trip right here?
Well, the Global Leadership Academy is exactly what it sounds like. We have a selected group of students. In fact, we select them and then they self-select themselves into the program. And what it's all about is creating a greater sense of global consciousness, preparing to live as global citizens and moving past the traditional supports for higher education and internationalism. So of course we're going to do study abroad, but we're really also talking about internships abroad. We're talking about building deep and ongoing connections between these students and others. And so certainly we'll be looking for the opportunities to connect groups of Liberian students with our students, who, as you know, in the modern age can communicate on a fairly regular basis across whatever oceans and lands that planes have to cross. Thoughts and ideas in the modern age travel much faster. And my experience has been, every place that I've been, when we are connecting students across these kinds of boundaries in creative and meaningful ways, we form lifelong partnerships that impact the outcomes in countries and in the world. That certainly was the case earlier in the life of our own institution through the work of W.B. Du Bois and many others. If you look at the history of African leadership, and so many of them were educated at our institutions here. So this is a continuation of that same thing. And now the students that I've been involved with historically that are now many of them all over Africa right now, doing some very creative things, and our capacity to connect them one with another and to connect them back here is a large part of what we're after.
Right.
And really, just a footnote to that, and to really, I serve as an example of the impact of a student exchange program. Who would have thought that at the age of 17, having lived and studied in Liberia, that X number of years forward that I would be the representative in the United States, card-carrying Department of State ID. I represent the Liberian government here in the United States of America, but I also have a relationship with the Department of State as one of their so-called employees. So that experience in country allowed me to, over the years, develop deep relationships, ongoing relationships, and to even establish my own company in the country. So I am now the ambassador here representing the president, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, and I'm hoping that this student exchange program that you all are putting forward will help to develop future ambassadors and future honorary consul generals and those kinds of leaders that will help make a huge impact in the world.
Okay, we have a few more minutes. In the time that remains, is there any aspect of the summit that we have not touched upon that you would like for our viewers to know about? Or is there just anything that that relates to the relationship between Clark Atlanta University, Liberia, the Liberian people, and the people of Atlanta that we have not touched upon that you would like to share with our viewers?
Well, let me say this. Our focus throughout is going to be on building sustainable, long-term relationships. This is not a fly in, do a few things, throw a few things on the ground, and forget about it. We want an ongoing, sustainable relationship with the nation that we believe can help the advancement of the nation as well as enhance the quality of the education of our students. We also believe that there are some enormous business propositions, just as I'm going to be suggesting to those institutions. Diversity of revenue sources is critical to the development of an underdeveloped institution. It's true there, and it is true here. So we think that there are a number of business propositions that our faculties and our students can become engaged in that create economies.
Okay.
And one of those might include, we're building on the Nollywood model,
Yep.
which is a $500 million proposition where we have entertainers who are coming out of that industry and making millions of dollars. We want to look at that model in partnership
Right.
with Clark Atlanta to build a Lollywood, a Liberian film industry. And hopefully we'll have one of our celebrities, Desmond Elliott, who is one of the premier entertainers for Nollywood, be a part of this summit. I've spoken to him and he's agreed to come, so that's going to be a draw. Young people want something to do, something that's exciting, something that's sexy, but also can bring in revenue, can also bring in, can put food on the table. And they love this whole entertainment idea. Nollywood is prolific in the industry. We hope to be able to model that in Liberia to build a Lollywood in partnership with Clark Atlanta University and our other partners.
Right.
And as you know, we do have a number of film and filmmaking assets and a number of students and graduates who are deeply involved. In fact, there's even one Liberian student here right now who's going to be a great filmmaker and a great media person in any vein as he goes forward. So the possibilities are incredible, and we want to see just how far we can take these possibilities.
That's great, and I'm glad that you said, Dr. Brown, about the sustainability, the long-term effect, because so often in Africa there's fly in, fly out, we sign memoranda, but nothing ever happens. But this is an ongoing, and we hope to sustain this over time and not just a fly-by-night. So we thank you also very much for enlightening our viewers relative to this mission trip. We hope that it's successful. We thank you all for your time here on A Conversation With. We thank you all so very much. We hope you've learned something about the education and business mission trip to Liberia. If you want to join us, there will be some information that can be left on the screen after this particular show. Please take advantage of that, and thank you so very much for joining us.